So, Berto, we just had our very first live event last weekend.
Right.
How do you feel about it?
Dude, it was amazing. It was so humbling to see all those people listen and travel for something they care about.
Yeah.
You know, there was that moment you and I were sort of thinking, all right, what do we do to come in? And we made up this little silly skit where we would pretend to be outside and then we'd run in. But in my mind, I was imagining, you know, a few people.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I was being too pessimistic. It was like 10, 15 people.
No. You know, it was 5 minutes. So the show started at 3. And it was 5 minutes before 3. And we were in the green room. We had no idea who was in the room. And someone came to us and said, yeah, it's about a third full.
Right.
I even said something like, so is it about half full?
Right.
You know, I was kind of hoping. And she's like, yeah, well, you know, maybe more like a third, you know? And so I was like, oh.
Now was she purposely sandbagging you or?
No. Everyone
so
arrived.
Really
yeah, everyone arrived right
second.
Yeah, at the last second.
Wow.
Which is typical for shows like that. And so that's why I actually built it into the program that we would start at like 3:10.
Right.
And so at 3:10 we enter the room and the place is not only full but like standing room only. And then later I learned that people were turned away because there weren't any seats.
So how many people were there?
I don't know. Like 70 to 100. I can't really
Yeah,
estimate.
it had to be like, because I was trying to do the mental count in my head. There were at least 5 people per section of row, and there were 2 rows or 2 sections.
Yeah.
So it's like at least 10 people per row.
Yeah.
And there were at least 10 rows. So it was like at least 100 people.
Right. And then there were people in the back and the side and blah, blah. And so now compared to other podcasts who get tens of thousands of people, you know, like This American Life or TBTL or stuff.
Peanuts.
Yeah, it's peanuts.
But it doesn't matter, dude. It's so great.
But when I was fairly certain that, you know, 30 people, you know, because in your head, you're always like, maybe thousands of people will come. And then in your mind, you're like, well, really, I only know about 10 who are coming. And so, you know, let's be real. It's probably best case scenario, 30 people.
That would have sucked if 1,000 people showed up, since most of them would have had to be.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Bye-bye. But anyways, it was so amazing. So we walked in. I couldn't even absorb everyone because I was just like, whoa.
Well, there are a lot of people.
Faces.
Yeah, there were a few, more than a few, but like as we're running around the room, I recognized maybe 1 or 2 people as the blur of faces, but most of them I had no idea. And I had this flash thought, like, did they think they were coming to something else? Because I don't recognize these people. Like, why are they here? Anyway.
That way, maybe you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
That would have been funny. We're like, this is exciting. So many people, so many of you came. Anyways, welcome to the Psychology. Wait, where are you going?
Yeah. We thought this was the bake sale or something. So let's talk about that today. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I sell whiteboards to universities.
We, during the so people have been asking, you know, like I've been talking to people in the last few days, and they're like, sorry I couldn't make it, you know, this or that, or, you know, sorry I couldn't get in because there weren't enough seats and I had to go away. And they're like, but I'll just listen to it. But here's the thing, although I kind of recorded it, I didn't plan on posting it, so it's just like a really low res recording. Plus, I purposely made the event a visual event, you know, because I didn't want to get up there and just do a podcast in front of a crowd. That's kind of boring. You know what I mean? So
there are visuals that you wouldn't get if you're just listening to it.
Right. If you just listen to the audio, you'd be, I imagine half the time you'd be like, I don't get what's happening.
You'd have to, at least on the YouTube side, pair the photos with the audio.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like, look at this photo.
Right.
Here you see, as you can see.
Right. Right. So, and well, what do you think? Do you think that's a good idea? Was that a good move to try to make it a visual entertainment based?
Oh yeah. I think the reactions were really positive.
Yeah.
Afterwards, there were people like, oh, that was really entertaining. You know?
Yeah.
And
I think people had really low expectations. And I would too. I'd be like, well, it's a podcast.
I think they would have enjoyed it even if it was just the two of us up front sitting, talking. But I think there was so much more there, and I think it made it more dynamic and more personal to be able to show some images, talk about them, and get the crowd involved, all that stuff.
Right. We talked about our childhoods. We showed pictures from our childhoods. We did little skits.
Right. And Rebecca drew, all that stuff.
Yeah. There was like Pictionary. It was a lot of crowd involvement. We gave out a lot of swag. We gave out awards. You sang a song, which was amazing.
That was fun to do too.
Yeah, that was amazing. In my head, I asked you to sing a song a while ago.
And it was sort of like, do you want to sing a song at the thing? I'm like, sure.
And I thought you would pull some song of yours from your archive and sing, some song. And I thought that the audience would be amazed at your talent and would be like, whoa, he can sing too, blah, blah, blah. It's interesting. And then, I don't know, maybe a week ago or something, I think I asked you, so what song are you going to sing or something? You're like, well, I wrote a song. Right. And I was like, what do you mean? And you're like, oh, it's a song. Don't worry about it. and I'm like, okay, so this could be either awesome or terrible. And so
an untested new song.
Right. So in my head, I thought, well, I bet you he wrote a song and wrote lyrics specifically for this event.
Right.
And in my head, I think I just landed on a probability that it was going to be really cheesy.
Yeah, like a little singy song talking about the podcast.
This is a podcast about psychology, and here I am. I thought it'd be just something like that. When you were singing it just gave me chills. The lyrics, you have a good way of turning a phrase that is interesting but also fits the situation, and in a big way, which I think I told you, is the song is almost like a theme song forever it's our song.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I did. The way it started is I was sitting at a lunch and this waiter brought over some food, and it included fries. And so in my head, I sang, "They brought some fries to the table." And I was like, what's that? Okay, maybe and that's how I started writing it. I'm like, oh, maybe I could use that to write a song for the podcast thing. And then that turned into Fools. And then that turned into like, okay, I think I'm going to talk about us, about like a little bit of the story or something,
Yeah.
And then it was really fun but I still wanted it to be a pop song, so 3 minutes, you know, 2 choruses, the bridge,
Well, it has the classic Humberto structure.
That's right.
Which is a verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, then extendo chorus.
And that's one thing I actually did, which I don't normally do, which is I don't usually do a verse after I've done the bridge.
Okay.
But this time it felt appropriate because
a breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but yeah, you and I was like, oh, we're kind of in the and you've done it with Plastic Polly too, but when we were in a band together with Missionary, what was the song we always ended with? Aquarian, but also like Let It Go, or
Let It Go was with Shun.
Yeah. Anyway, there were Aquarian, but also anyway, I just remember you have songs where
we used to end with Let It Go with Shun, I think.
And you have an extendo ending to that song.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of like a jam ending. It's like a song you write to end the show with.
Oh, and with Plastic Polly, we end with what was it called? The Last Hurrah. What was it called?
I don't know the name of the song, but you.
And then we do an extended jam at the end.
But it's like you kind of land on a root chord, and it's sort of a jam space where you can vocal and drums and guitar and stuff. Anyway, so I was like, oh, you got that. But anyway, I loved the metaphor of 2 fools dancing on a needle, and those in the know you're talking about Space Needle, but it's also kind of, I'm guessing, like a metaphor of like the precariousness of a podcast.
Yeah, I mixed several things there. Like there's that famous thing about how many angels,
and our heroin addiction, of course.
Our heroin, yeah. How many angels can fit on the head of a needle?
Oh.
Do you remember that?
No.
It was sort of one of these unanswerable things that a philosopher would ponder. It's like, how many angels would fit on the head of a needle? So it's just a saying that doesn't have that much meaning to me, but it's something that I've heard all my life. But then I was picturing that, and I was thinking, like in the chorus, I'm addressing this idea that empathizing with someone else's head is sort of tricky. Like, it's not, because we can't actually inhabit the other head. Oh. But a lot of what we do when we do this podcast, and I suppose when you do psychology, is you sort of try to empathize with others' feelings and experiences and things. So I was saying, it sort of takes fools to do that. And fools in the good sense, like you got to be willing to open yourself up and be a little goofy and be a little like non-standard and stuff like that. And so then coupling that with, then we are all fools dancing on the tip of a needle. That was, a very kind of visual thing. And at first, my very first thing was like, we were talking on the needle. And that was very literal, but then I got a little more metaphoric with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the visual in my head of like these two fools dancing on the Space Needle, and just like I just love that.
It's kind of neat.
In my head, I'm like when the Last of Us dies or something, and there's the final website post or something is just like someone draws a picture of two idiots sort of like. And the sun setting and like, forever dancing on the needle.
Someone's got to draw that. By the way, should I start? I think I'm going to start a music therapy session, or thing. I won't even be licensed, but every session I just sing that song to people.
Yeah.
And I tell them.
You say, well, this is about you and me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I got chills with the song, and it was saying a lot.
Fun to do. Thanks for the opportunity. It was really good. It was very fun to do.
Yeah, we'll do. And I told you I think we should actually.
Oh, we'll record it.
Formally record it. Yeah. So we could share it with everybody.
Quotes.
I want to thank everyone who came. And as I posted on Facebook, I can't tell you. Berto was sort of talking about this. Can't tell you how awesome it was to actually meet actual fans of the show. We've been doing this podcast for 9.5 years. Right. And I've been emailing. So since we began, there's been a slow, exponential growth in the amount of emails I get and comments I get. And so, I've communicated, and maybe even over the phone occasionally at times, for consultation or something. But it's always like one-on-one, and sort of you're in another town, and it's a distant voice or a distant email or something, disembodied, if you will. It was one thing. That's one thing. But then this weekend we met face to face. Oh, and the other thing is I've met face to face people who have listened to the podcast, but they're students of mine or friends of mine or family members, and maybe they became fans and they listen all the time. But to me, it's like, well, you're just being nice because you're a friend or you're a student, or, it's not, you're not a person off the street who just randomly found me. You know what I mean? And so this weekend was, and we were talking about this, you said maybe you met one random fan a long time ago, but really for the first time for the two of us, we finally met actual fans who found us randomly and aren't connected to us. Yeah.
Whose only reason for coming is because they actually enjoy and get something out of the show. Right.
They're not friends. They're not family. They only know us through the podcast.
Although we paid them off, but that's a separation.
Yeah, exactly. And so not only just meeting one of them, but to meet like
a whole bunch.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them.
Like at the end of the thing, you said, yeah, and if anyone wants to take pictures. And again, I don't know why I'm so pessimistic. I was thinking like, we might get one picture out of it.
Well, what I was hoping was at least one, but in my head, I'm like, well, no one's going to want to take a picture with us.
And then we had like this long line.
Yeah, it just kept coming and coming. Yeah. By the way, I've posted all those after podcast photos on our Facebook Psychology in Seattle page. I haven't
seen all those. Okay.
I just did that. Okay. So go there. If you were one of those people who took a picture with us, there's the place you could download. And it was just overwhelming to meet them, and then to learn that so many of them were it seemed like most of the fans who came to the podcast were not from Washington State.
Yeah.
You know?
There were a lot of Californians.
I mean, to me, I thought, well, surely the Seattle fans will come in droves, right? Because they're so close. Right. But most of the fans were not.
Were external.
Yeah, it was like 2 from Canada, Philadelphia, Maryland, multiple from California, Michigan, Oregon, and
Ireland.
And Ireland, of course.
You know, prophets are not prophets in their hometown.
What's that mean?
You know, if you're a prophet back in the old days, you probably had to travel because in your town they're like, what? You're just Bob. You don't know what's coming.
Right. But you go to another town.
Like, whoa, how do you know that?
Right. All the Seattleites know we're just regular Joes. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And so yeah, that was overwhelming just to be like, oh my God. Like I knew about a couple people who were flying in, which was already a huge honor. Actually, I'll take that back. I only knew of one person who was actually flying in, and that was Lyndon
FPL,
because he was actually going to be in the show, and
it was great meeting him in person.
Right,
that was so good.
Yeah,
we shared some and thanks for the bottle of Irish whiskey. Thank you.
Speaking of, here is your most confusing Humberto post awarded to Humberto.
The most confusing Humberto post goes to Humberto Castañeda for the Two Roads Divergent.
Those are really well-made awards.
Yeah, these are impressive.
They're like laminated, and
he took his time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh?
It's hilarious because it's got the little pattern that I made this so long ago. This little icon.
Yeah. Yeah, he somehow like photoshopped that or something.
I mean, I got the pattern in Photoshop, so I used like the mosaic format or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because of the symbols and the logos, because you made that logo like probably in 09 or 08.
Yeah, like 9 years ago.
Yeah, and I remember thinking every once in a while, I'm like, well, of course we're going to update that. But every time, it's just like, no, I don't think you can come up with a better logo.
It was sort of too perfect. It was sci and psychology and Space Needle. And it was like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, every once in a while you manage to pull something off. But yeah, so what else can we say? Then after the show, we went to a bar and had some beers and interacted with everyone. Oh,
that was fun too.
And then we sang happy birthday to you.
Oh, I know, because it was my birthday the very next day, actually at midnight that evening. Yeah. I loved doing the rounds. So I was like a little hummingbird. You know, I would go to each one of the sections and buzz for a little bit. Yeah. And I think I was always sort of welcome in each one of the stops. Yeah. It was very nice.
Yeah.
And so many people bought me a drink.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that explains it.
Which is the whole, that's true. The whole reason why I started this in the first place was to get people to buy me free drinks,
free booze, yeah. That was funny during Rebecca's drawing game, and you said bicycle.
That was hilarious. Well, because...
Well, let me explain it. Yeah. So Rebecca Bloom, who's been on the podcast before, she's an art therapist, and she has this amazing ability to draw while blindfolded. And so people would come up from the audience and tell her what to draw, and then she would blindfold herself and she would draw it, and people in the audience were trying to guess.
That's right.
And so someone comes from the audience, tells her to draw something.
It was Anita.
Yeah, Anita did. And then you're like, okay. She's like, okay, so she blindfolds herself and she's just about to draw it. And then you said...
And I joked, sorry, before I said it, I joked. I said, I heard that, but of course I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
And then I say, is it a bicycle?
Yeah. And Rebecca kind of had to do this mental calculation because in her head she's like, oh my God, he just randomly guessed it, but he doesn't know it. He thinks he's joking. So should I draw the bicycle and then just, keep going, or what do I do? And I was still trying to manage the event. I'm thinking like, where are we in the schedule and everything?
So I see her lift her little eye flap.
Yeah, and she looks at you
and she's like, that's right.
Yeah, she sort of said it quietly.
Yeah, like that was it.
That was it. You just guessed it.
And I'm thinking she's joking. She's messing with me.
Yeah.
So I say, like, like I'm just laughing. And she's like, no. I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, yes. Like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was the ESP talking.
And it was great when I did my gripes of wrath, and the patrons who came up were awesome.
That's right.
We had Emily and Maite.
Oh, yeah, you did the
and Hallie.
The walking on the sidewalk reenactment.
Yeah. At that point, I didn't know who they were. I only knew who Maite was, but I didn't realize the other two people were hardcore patrons who had actually, come from far away. Emily came from far away, right? But anyway, so let me actually just sort of throw out some of the people who I remember coming. Yeah, it was Lyndon from Ireland. We got April from Vancouver. Remember April and her partner?
Oh yeah, they were great.
Maite from California.
Although April, or more specifically her boyfriend, thinks he can come on here and tell us about the Darth Jar Jar theory.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to...
So we've emailed already, and they're from Vancouver, BC, which isn't that far from Seattle. And so the next time they're down here, we'll go over the Jar Jar theory. Susie from Whittier, California. We had Emily from Philly, Hallie from Lake Stevens, Sierra from Seattle, Yunji from Eugene,
Emily from Philadelphia.
Did I not say that? Yeah, I said that.
Oh, you said
from
that.
Philly, yeah. Serenity, Jackie from Seattle, Beth from Olympia, Dakota, I think from the area, Krista from Vancouver, BC. She's the animator for Rick and Morty.
Oh my gosh, she is my hero.
She sent us her Rick and Morty reel, which was hilarious.
It was real good.
Rachel from Federal Way, Kylie from Redmond, Liz and Nate from Michigan, and Matt from California. If I've left out anyone, Brittany, I remember Brittany being there. But anyway, I'm sure I'm forgetting people. And so those are just the fans. And then of course we had friends and family who came as well. We had the Unpopular Culture people come.
Oh yeah,
Jane and Corey. We had Aaron and Christy and
that's right,
and Jessamy and Laura Matthews has been on the podcast before. She was there.
Angie or Agnieszka.
Agnieszka, Katie.
Which,
Anita.
by the way, I was so embarrassed because I didn't see her while we were doing the show.
Oh.
Even though she was like in the second row and right next to someone that I did see.
Yeah.
And so later at the bar, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? It's so great to see you. You missed a great show. And she looks at me like I'm speaking in gibberish. It's like, what are you talking about? The show was today. Did you not know? And I'm thinking she's saying that I don't know what I'm talking about because she didn't know about the show. And she's like, I was there. I saw you. I looked at you. I was in the second row. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I did.
That was funny when I was like, okay, so Berto, I need you to make a shocking face, like you're surprised.
Right.
And I'm like, so, what could I say that would surprise you? And then someone in the audience says, you're funny. That was hilarious.
It was quite shocking.
Yeah. We announced our $2,000 patron-funded donation to the Pet Finder Foundation.
That's right.
And which was wonderful. And I actually got an email from the Pet Finder Foundation from a rep who was like, anything we can do to help with the podcast, promoting Pet Finder in the future, let us know.
Can they tell the dogs and cats about the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Well, so the final thing I'll say here, Berto, is that in some ways, this is... I've been telling people, people have been asking, you know, friends and colleagues, like, oh, I couldn't make it, how to go. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad you didn't, because you would have been, someone would have had to go away, you know what I mean? And they're friends. So it's like, but anyway, I've been telling people that it was kind of like a wedding. Because like you were talking about at the bar afterwards, you're going around to the different cliques and having conversations. That's what you do at a wedding, right? You have to make sure, everyone is there for you and me. Right. Which sounds arrogant to say, but that's true. I mean, empirically, it was like, they are coming to see us, you and me on stage. And so wherever we go, people are trying to talk with us and like eyes are on us which was funny too, because like when we were saying when the show was ended, we were saying, oh, we're going to go to a bar. I kept asking people if they were coming, fully expecting them to say, no, I'm so sorry, I got plans or I got to go. But more often than not, the answer is like, yeah. Yeah.
And then we're at the bar, and it's like, oh, are you staying for a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were there for like 5 hours.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Because we were there from like 5 to 10.
That was what also tripped me up, because we started the show so early.
Yeah.
But it was a big, like, we put a lot of energy into it.
Yeah.
By the time we got to the bar, I felt like it was like 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And yet I look and I'm like, whoa, it's 5.
Yeah. So my bigger point here is that it was a I don't know how to say this. It was a huge moment for you and me.
Yeah.
In our relationship.
That's right. We made vows to each other in front of the judge.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've been through a lot together. We've been on stage together in bands, and we've done podcasts together, but like right now we're just in my office, there's no one around. There's a certain lack of intensity to a situation like that. But to, you know, go through to depend, there's a certain, I don't know what to say. There's a certain friendship or intensity to a relationship when you need to depend on another human being on stage.
Yeah, when you go through something intense where you have to prepare and then you have to like do it, you can't quite imitate that in another way.
Right.
You just had to be there. You had to go through it together.
Yeah, and I felt like I'm normally nervous about situations like that. Like I'm normally pretty shaky and pretty in my head I was like, okay, you're about to get on stage in front of, you know, a bunch of people and you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, like the other thing I've been telling people is normally when I teach or when I give presentations or when I do the podcast, it's informational first, and if it happens to be entertaining, then great.
Right.
And I've always sort of pride myself on prouded. I've always
it's prided.
I've prided myself.
Yeah.
I have pride in the ability to sprinkle in entertainment.
Yeah.
Among information.
Right.
But this was the first time where I set out to make it entertaining. Mm-hmm. And if it happens to be informational, then great.
Right.
And so that's why I broke it up into little 5-minute chunks, and I tried to make it like touching, but also funny. And we did crowd work the entire time. And so the entire time you and I are on stage, it was like improv. Like there was a rough outline, but like it was completely, most of what happened was unplanned.
That's right.
The moments, the off the cuff remarks, the blah, blah, blahs. And to be looking to you and to bounce off of you in front of a crowd of people and to have it go so well.
Right.
Like I just remember thinking, this is going really well.
Yeah.
Like there's not a moment here where I'm thinking, that didn't go well.
Pull up.
Yeah, I was just thinking this is going way better. So in my head going into it, I was like, well, you know, if half of this kind of lands, then I'll say I succeeded, because what do I know about it? Basically, it was like a stand-up comedy show.
Right.
It was improv stand-up comedy for a bunch of people, you know. And I remember while it was happening, I just thought like, man, this is just going so well. Like, and what a great thing that not only can I depend on Berto to be dependable, to, you know, do what needs to get done, and he can depend on me, you know, because we've done things with other people where you do something and they just sort of crumble in the moment, you know, or they just sort of like defer back to you.
And then you just have to pick up. And be,
you know, like there's a lull in the moment and they're just like, well, I don't know, Kirk, like, what do you think? You know, they sort of panic and they throw the ball back at you.
Yeah.
But you never did that. You know, it was always like, if I could pass it off and you instantly would know, you just boom, like no wrinkle, no bumps in the road, just fluid and, you know, working the crowd. Like, you know,
I think, I mean, even though it wasn't live, and you're right, it's not aimed at entertainment first, we have done the talking for years. So I did get to lean on that, you know, I got to leverage that. I feel this feels very familiar and comfortable.
Right, which is another point I want to make, which is that strangely, we've been preparing for a live improv entertainment / kind of comedy show since we started this whole thing. Right. Like the repertoire and the knowing of another person, you know, someone right afterwards said, you guys are like Abbott and Costello. which I thought was a very timely reference, you know?
Sure.
But, and I thought that was so true. I didn't know what to say to that other than thank you. But after I thought about that later, and I was just like, that's kind of true. You know, another.
We Are As Good As the famous album.
Yeah. But like, that's what it felt like to me, was just like the ability to riff and to make jokes and to, you know, work with the crowd and, you know, keep things moving and how each of us have kind of like a persona, I guess, and how it all fits together. And there's like there's inside jokes and there's bounds and but there were touching moments too, you know, very touching moments. I thought
I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to get so touchy.
But the touching moments, I did not design the touching moments. Like afterwards, I was like, ooh, that was actually a serendipitous, a design in the agenda, in that it ends with a couple touching things.
That's right.
But that was not how I planned it. You know, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice to end on a heartfelt moment, you know?
Well, one of the things, and I definitely leveraged this in the song, but not knowing, like, seriously, you know me, I would write a song and play it in my living room by myself, right? So it's a bonus if there's a person there to listen. Yeah. But I definitely knew that if you heard the show enough, you would get a ton of references. And so I was definitely hoping that was going to be a thing, because I was going to throw out the little like gripes of wrath or tough or bluff and things. And when you're in the audience and you're hearing someone just wrote a song and you can recognize these things, it's like an extra little Easter egg, right? Like, oh, I know what he's talking about. Yeah. And that was fun. And I felt that one of the reasons so many of those bits landed is because we were with an audience that has listened and absorbed and liked a lot of the content. Right. And so it felt familiar, but in a live twist. With a twist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was amazing. Another thing along those lines that I don't know why it surprised me, but I was very pleasantly surprised, which was that people were laughing hard when you said things. Yeah. Like you would crack, you know, what I would consider to be like, you know, a mildly entertaining
silly joke
crack. And people were, you know, laughing loudly.
But that's because you always cut me off and don't listen to my jokes.
Yeah. Because, you know, when I'm around you, it's not like I'm rolling on the floor when you do your, you know, like frequent cracks. Right. And vice versa, right? But and I get emails from people saying one way or the other about you. You know, some people love you, some people don't, and so you know,
I want names.
The people who don't like you are probably people who aren't fans of the podcast. One and two. Well, really, I mean, just as a blanket statement, like if there are probably among podcast listeners, there's probably only a small percentage who like both of us. Yeah. You know what I mean? You have to like the voice, the politics, the approach, the jokey format, the language. You know, there's a lot of things that have to come together. And so so if someone doesn't like me, they're not going to email me and tell me that they're just going to not listen. Yeah. But if someone likes me but they don't like you, then I'm going to get an email, you know what I mean? So anyway, my point is that I had a rough estimate of how people generally respond to you as they're listening, but I've never witnessed it. Do you know what I mean? I've always just been like, well, I have a rough guess, but seeing it in the room, both not only from the live event at Antioch,
Friday night,
but also at Friday night, the day before the live event, we did a live podcast in my living room.
That one tripped me up because I was listening to it and I didn't remember the laughs.
People were,
so I thought you added the laughs.
Well, and you can't really hear the laughs because I didn't mic the.
You can hear them. I mean,
you can hear them, but in the room it was much louder.
Sure, yeah.
And I realized after Friday and Saturday that there's a lot of listeners who think you're funny. Way funnier than I realized. You know what I mean?
Self-deluded listeners.
Like very. You know how like I've experienced this myself in that. You know, I'm not as far down the spectrum as you are, but
what spectrum?
I crack wise, you know.
Yes.
I'll make jokes when I have the impulse, and I have the impulse a lot.
Yeah.
And as an instructor, as a professor, I've always been that way. And I teach a new batch of students almost every quarter. And so I've seen this progression every single quarter. I walk the first day of teaching class, especially if none of them know me, I'll make a couple wisecracks in the span of teaching for 3 hours, and I'll get either no response or a slight chuckle from one or two people. By mid-quarter, I could crack wise about something really stupid. I could just I could just emulate a joke as long as it had the inflection of a voice of a joke. The room is on the floor
because they're a friendly crowd at that point.
Right. Yeah. At that point, they know me. They sort of know when I'm going to make a wisecrack, and it's all, you know, that's why when you go to see Chris Rock, all he has to do is walk out on the stage and you're already laughing. Which
is what's got to be so difficult about being a stand-up comic, being unknown, right? You walk out into a cold audience.
Well, and stand-up comics will say this, like there's this huge stand-up comic in France. There's a podcast on This American Life about him.
He's a giant?
Yeah. He's like Louis C.K. in France. And as a challenge, he came to the States to try to, in English, to become a stand-up comic over here. And people did not respond to him.
It did not work.
Yeah. And so there's this whole segment of the podcast where he's like, no one thinks I'm funny, but I'm gonna make it happen, you know. And he's like, because no one even knows me. Whereas I go to France, I can do anything over there, and they just laugh.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, so that was great to see that listeners, fans, not only just tolerate you, but actually like fully enjoy you. You know what I mean? Like to see that was actually really great, you know, to see that love given to you. Because I've always defended, you know, this sounds like a back. There have been people, you know, people who email and be like, okay, Kirk, you're great, but enough of that Berto guy, you know what I mean? Like what's that guy, like his wisecracks and, you know, like what's he doing? He's a lay person. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so
oh, sweet.
Now I know I've sent you some of those mean tweets. You know what I mean? Yeah, I've sent you some.
Okay. They must roll off my mean or my wisecracking back.
Now, you also obviously get a lot of very positive feedback as well, which I also send to you at times. But I know this sounds mean, but my point is that I really had no idea how much the fans loved you. Like seeing the crowd respond to you and more than they were to me, I thought. There were times when I was like, man, the crowd not only loves Berto, but they love him 10 times more than they love me.
Maybe the only ones that showed up are the ones that like me. Maybe we would have had 10,000 people.
And then when we went to the bar afterwards, it was the same kind of vibe. You know what I mean? Like I saw you going around from group to group, and sometimes I would go with you.
Yeah.
And the crowd was just like enthralled with you. Like everything you did was just, everyone was just like, I want more of Berto.
Well, to be fair, I tend to be pretty fun at parties and bars.
Totally. And I've been to many of those parties and bars with you, but this was different.
Yeah.
I mean, this was way different.
Fair
you
enough.
know what I mean? Like the
I even impressed Chong of all people. You know what Chong said to me?
So
Chong
this is an old friend.
Old friend from college, and we love each other, but man, we give each other a lot of crap too. And he, towards the end of the night, he's like, you know, Humberto, I guess you're a little cooler than I thought. Thank you, Chong. Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to just mention if you have anything more to say about the live podcast.
Oh man, I guess the last thought I had was part of the thing that touched me, like in that good way, touching, was that I've started this when you asked me to do it just from the perspective of, sure, my friend wants to do this thing. He thinks it'll help his professional side, and I don't have anything better to do right now. Let's just do it. And then over the years, I kept doing it, and the reason sort of morphed into a combination of habit, and it's fun for me, like sort of selfishly. Like I like sitting here and just talking about topics that I like talking about. But the realization that what we say and do helps people in some ways. And as I've mentioned before, I like to open up about my experiences and kind of thinking, oh, that might actually help some people, or at least give them different perspectives. That's really great. Like, that feels really
Did people vocalize that to you?
Basically, it was some combination of, and I'm totally paraphrasing, of the appreciating of my being honest on the podcast, and of like opening up so much. And then that was combined with, but how come you never reveal this? But, you know, like my whole thing is, I like to talk about my past, my experiences, all my, you know, growing up, all these things, and be at least as open as I can, which is pretty open.
But we both have boundaries, and
yeah. But because so many times growing up, I felt I must be the only person that's going through this. I must be the only person that has to deal with this situation or this experience. Yeah. And I think that's got to be such a common human thing.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I've had a lot of people on the podcast, not as obviously as much as you, but I always know I can throw whatever I have to throw, and you will go with it. And sometimes when I don't even plan on you telling like a personal story, it'll veer in that direction.
To a fault.
No.
you're like alien abductions. You know, I was once abducted by aliens.
No, it's always fascinating stuff. I mean, you've had a, you know, interesting, rich life that the listeners and I enjoy hearing about. So yeah.
Cool.
In conclusion, I just have a couple announcements to make. One is that a listener to the podcast and a friend of mine from preschool, her name's Diane. She's in the hospital, and I hope she's okay. So if you're listening out there, Diane, this is a shout out to you. I'm sure by the time this is posted, I will have. Well, no, I'm going to post this tomorrow, so I might not know the status. But anyway.
Oh, I hope she's okay.
Yeah,
and her family.
Yeah. Another couple things here is that I know in the past couple months, I don't know if anyone cares or notices, but I haven't had a lot of time for the podcast to do deep dives. You know, we do 3 episodes a week, and so that's already pretty time consuming. And deep dives require basically like a week or 2 of free time. Like any deep dive that I do, in all likelihood, I spent at least 4 evenings researching and writing and you know, thinking and blah blah blah. And sometimes like a whole month of evenings, you know. And so I haven't had a lot of time, you know. In December, I was finishing up my book and publishing it and doing other things. And then January, I was preparing for the live show and everything like that. And so, more deep dives are coming.
Nice.
And I'm already working on one on OCD and another one.
I love that band.
Another one on Alex Jones. Do you know much about Alex Jones?
I mean, I know quite a bit because I both listened to the guy.
Oh, you do?
In a researchy sort of way.
Maybe we should do that one. Maybe we should do that one together.
Famous Enemies with the Young Turks, and he's done some very infamous episodes trying to expose cults and things.
Well, let's do that one together.
Okay, would love to.
And also, before the show, I said to so a long time, people have been asking us to do, so another point I want to make actually before I forget is that, you know, you mentioned the sort of progression of why you did the podcast. Well, for the first couple years, it was basically like doing it for a few people who randomly would come across it, or a few friends who would randomly come across it. It wasn't, we didn't really have a fan base. I mean, there were some people. Yeah. But not a lot, you know what I mean? And then in the middle period, sort of like year 1 to year 6, I was pretty busy, and so we would maybe meet like once a month or something, and we wouldn't put a lot of effort into the shows. You know, it was like a lot of tougher bluffs and a lot of just gabbing, which I really liked, and I think they're good episodes. But at the same time, we weren't really attracting anyone. I think it was still pretty sparse in terms of the actual fans. Yeah. And then it's really only been in the past 2 or 3 years that I think the content has gotten a lot better, and our fan base has really increased, like exponentially every month.
Yeah,
and the numbers.
The growth since last year was big.
Right, the growth since last year, and the growth from the year before that. And really, I kept asking as people were coming to take pictures with us.
Yeah,
I would be like, do you listen to the podcast? Because some people, they were just there randomly, you know what I mean?
Some people did get dragged, like
right.
girlfriends or boyfriends dragged their significant others.
Right. And so I would ask, do you listen to podcasts? And you know, if they said yes, I said, how long? And most of them, it was like 1 or 2 years. So I think if you, and when I sent that survey out to all the patrons,
yeah,
surprisingly to me, I thought, because I would have thought if you're a patron, you've been a fan for a long time, but it's actually not true. I think most of the true fans of the podcast discovered us really with probably average like 1.5 years.
And you know, statistically, that only makes sense, because picture what it takes for you to randomly discover a podcast.
Yeah.
And for you to be the kind of person that's going to really love that podcast.
Yeah.
When the podcast is not well known and it's just like some random bubble up in a search or a recommend or something, the odds are low that you're going to be like, the affinity is going to be high there. But as the podcast gets a little more popular, maybe the rankings get a little higher, maybe the search results get a little better, it's more likely that you're going to have that matching between the kind of person that would like that and that content.
Yeah.
So that sort of makes sense.
And we have 670 odd episodes of different titles that people will search. You know, they search for Game of Thrones, or they search for eating disorders or something, and the more likelihood that they'll land to one of us, and then the more anyway, this isn't just a conversation, but anyway, the point is that
most of our hardcore listeners are recent,
right? And I think it's, as you were talking about your enjoyment or sort of your mission or the reason why you would come over here and do this, you know, every now and then, I was thinking about it for myself, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting because, you know, in the past few years, especially since we became, you know, on Patreon, which would have been 2 years, 2 months ago or something. This podcast has really become like a major part of my life. You know, it's way more so than in the past. Anyway, so the last thing I want to say is that throughout the time, fans have been saying you should do a live show, and I've sort of toyed with it, you know, and every once in a while I'm like, okay, we're going to do a live podcast. Like probably a few years ago, I was like, okay, we're going to do a live podcast. And we've done live podcasts for students and friends and stuff, never for random people. And like we did this past weekend. And every time I would set out to plan it, I would run into some kind of barrier, like, I'm pretty sure no one's going to come, or where do I do it?
Yeah.
Or why would I do it? You know, like I would be putting myself out there, you know, how embarrassing would it be if only a couple people showed up? And so, but then about like 6 months ago, it just occurred to me, like, why not do it at Antioch? You know, because if I do it at Antioch, they can kind of glom onto some of the publicity a little bit, you know, and I'll get like a free facility.
Yep.
And an easy to find facility that was locked, by the way. That was wonderful. But
the room was great.
Yeah. And you went to the old one, which completely freaked me out. But anyway, and so I decided to do it. And in my head, I said, look, if this fails, or if only 20 people come, I just won't do it again, you know, or I'll wait another few years and I'll revisit this whole idea. But I said to myself, if a good crowd comes, let's do it again.
Yeah, if they come, we will build it.
Right. And boy, did people come.
Yep.
So we're definitely going to do another one.
Monthly, twice a month.
No. And I've said to myself, as long as people come, I'll keep doing more. Yeah. So we'll do another one, and if people come to that one, then we'll do another one. But if no one comes to this next one, no harm, no foul.
No harm, no foul. Yeah.
We'll just, I'll just be like, okay, no big deal. So what I was thinking, Humberto, this is the first time bringing this up to you. Tell me what you think. Is there a natural next moment of doing a live show, do you think?
A natural next moment?
Like, what makes sense of when we would do the next one?
There's certainly yearly, but there could be also when we started the podcast.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought.
Yeah, which is June or something?
August.
August. Okay.
So August will be our 10-year anniversary.
What?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That's right. August would be the 10th. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
right.
a big deal.
The other milestone would be when we reach 1,000 episodes, which will probably be in a couple years. But in the meantime, so maybe like the next one is the 10-year, and then the next one will be the 1,000th.
Why are we slacking so much?
Yeah. And so we're announcing it now that it's a tentative schedule.
Tentative 10-year anniversary.
But pretty sure that we'll do it in August.
So it may or may not be our 10-year anniversary in August.
Yeah. And I was also thinking that we could do something kind of interesting about that. Like, I don't know, just something a little bit bigger and different, than what we did this last time. I don't know. Well,
yeah.
So
I'm going to start cooking the brain on some meth.
So August 2018, 10-year anniversary show.
Woo!
So let's do it. That does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks so much for coming, everyone who came this past weekend. You really made us feel special and honored, and it just gives me so much more motivation to do this thing.
Totally. Because we at least know that they're listening.
Please take care of yourself, because
you deserve it.